G'day everyone. Welcome to episode 8 of the Western Bulldogs podcast, Barclay Street, with your hosts, Robert Murphy and Marcus Bontempelli III, brought to you by our great friends Mercedes-Benz Vans. Marcus, what is your middle name, by the way?
My middle name is Carlo, actually, after Dad, my father. So
I could guess that, actually. I should have guessed that. That's an easy guess.
Yeah. Aptly named after him, which I'm very happy and proud about.
Did Carlo?
What's yours?
I'm not telling.
Oh, really?
Robert Daniel Murphy.
That's all right. It's good.
Yeah, it's pretty exotic. Did Carlo? Did he ever want to go down the Carlo Bontempelli Jr.?
I reckon he would have. I reckon there would have been half a thought.
I reckon. How are you, man? What's going on?
Carlo Jr. I'm good, mate. I think sort of as we've discussed and caught up over the last sort of couple of weeks, I think we're all, as we've touched on, getting a bit of a sense that, and especially with some announcements in the last couple of days, that footy is on its way back to some extent. We're not 100% clear on what it looks like from a league point of view just yet, but there certainly is a good feel, mate. So it's just nice to know that we're going to be hopefully training together again at some point, whether that be in small groups to start with, which it seems like will probably be the way, but certainly getting a good feel about getting back out there and having a kick with the lads pretty soon.
Sounds like that full training and even contact training might be on the cards pretty soon, which is pretty positive.
Yeah, it is, and we're keen to, as everyone would probably assume, get together and train together as soon as we can, particularly with what's probably been said with around a shorter sort of mini pre-season and lead up. You want to try and get in as many sort of good quality sessions, particularly from a speed point of view, as you can. So as soon as we sort of get the green light, we'll be ready to go.
What's the sort of routine with contact from the club? Like, are you doing these Zoom chats or is it phone calls, or how does it work? How often?
Pretty much, mate. I think from a leadership perspective, as leaders, we've clearly got a bit more responsibility trying to keep the group obviously connected in times where you can't sort of catch up sort of one-on-one or physically. So we've got and always have had the group obviously broken up into small sort of subgroups and subsections, which is pretty much based on years played, and those are sort of open chats and forums for us to catch up pretty much weekly or every 2 weeks, and just an opportunity to touch base, just to see how everyone's tracking. We continue with our leaders meetings, which happen pretty much every week too. So it's, what you're trying to do is just best stay across how everyone's sort of feeling, emotions wise, physically, and obviously mentally too as well. So, and then outside of that, mate, you know what social media is like nowadays. There's so many different ways to sort of stay in touch and connect through different sort of apps and whatnot, that you're already sort of quite practicing it because you're already talking to each other quite a fair bit anyway. So it's just those general chats that you're trying to pick up on how players are coping and traveling. And I've certainly felt like the last sort of week or two, there's been a good sort of energy and vibe around, hopefully getting back soon. So that's helped. And it seems like the boys are training and going pretty well. So, once again, looking forward to being back out there.
Yeah, nice. What about Maya? What's the puppy update? What's happening?
Yeah, going well. Sort of doing I think the progression for me now has been a little bit of obedience sort of training with her, and being a kelpie, she's quite strong-willed. So, at times it's a little bit challenging, but largely she's going well, sleeping well, sleeping right through, which is great. And her interactions with the other little pup, Nala, are pretty funny. So a couple of times they have little tiffs and whatnot. So you're trying your best not to this is a little bit humorous, but not trying to teach them any bad habits. So far less accidents, which is good too. So she's learning as well pretty quickly.
How is Dunks coping with the emergence of Maya? With he's had a stranglehold on the puppy market with puppy Dunks having its own
Bit of competition.
Yeah.
You reckon? Yeah.
Well,
As far
seems
as I
like
know, what's that?
there's a bit of tension in the kennel, as it were.
There, there could be a little bit actually. At one point when we get back together, it'll be interesting to see how they socialize when we can officially do that and see what sort of temperaments they have towards each other. I dare say there could be a little bit of competitiveness, maybe, what football clubs are like, whether it's with football or other things alike. But I'm sure they'll get along just fine, mate. Because you've got a Kelpie too. We haven't spoken too much about your Kelpie, but Huey, how's Huey been tracking?
Huey Lewis.
Yeah.
He's asleep next to me, right? He spends, because I'm in here for the most of the day doing the afternoon radio, and he just flops down next to me in front of the heater and sleeps. So he's a very, very happy dog at home. He's a rescue. I told you. So we rescued him about a year ago. He's 18 months. So when we take him out on the lead, he's wild.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So he's a stay
Off the
at
lead?
home dog. No.
Have you ever? You haven't tried? No.
No. off the lead would be pyong, and we never saw him again. So no, he's a home dog. So but he's beautiful. The kids love him. And Arthur, we've got Arthur, sausage dog. 16, like it's like
wow, unbelievable.
Not slowing down.
Yeah, and they get along pretty well, don't they? Together. Yeah.
It took a little while. There was a bit of a power struggle early just to sort of sort out.
Alpha. Who's the alpha?
Huey's very respectful of the older dog. Arthur's in charge.
Yeah.
He's the old. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's the way to probably roll.
Arthur's allowed on the
couch.
Yeah, Arthur's allowed on the couch. Huey's not allowed on the couch. So hey, so it's I think midnight tonight, which will be yesterday for the people listening. It's a bit weird. But it sounds like so you can catch up with close friends or family. I think what is it? A group of 5, is it?
Yeah, I think it's visitors. You can have up to 5, or don't quote me on that because I'm not the premier, but I think it's something. I think you're right.
Yeah. Which teammate will you be first on the list to catch up with?
Yeah, good question. There's probably a couple. I missed, like, in these times you do miss, I guess, the locker room. You miss the banter. You miss the funny characters throughout the football club, and some of the funny ones. Cal Porter's one of my sort of favourite locker room guys because he's, he'll take the mickey out of himself. He's happy to be the butt of his own jokes a little bit, but there's just something, about him that's incredibly funny, and then does bring the group together for a laugh all the time. So he's one I'll be looking forward to having a chat with for sure. Billy Gowers is always up to, some interesting stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what he's doing. And then a couple of the lads that I'm, always, chatting to in sort of Jongy. Lynn Jong's another cracker. So, really good from a locker room point of view. But, it's going to be great to catch up with all of them, really, because, strange things, obviously, with what we've been dealing with. But be great just to be back together with all the lads, hopefully at some point soon.
Well, it's good to catch up with you. Good to hear that footy's not too far away. You seem in good spirits. What do you know about Nathan Brown, former Bulldog, former Tiger, enigmatic sort of small forward halfback flanker? What are your memories of him as a young fella?
Well, I was a big fan of Brownie, and we probably discussed both our supporting of the Tigs growing up. And I think once he sort of moved, number 7 he was, wasn't he? Yeah. So when he moved across, I probably had him more as earmarked as a Richmond player, sort of in my mind, because I think, what year did he move across? Was it early
2004?
Early 2000. So I would have been about nine at the time. So that's sort of the perfect sort of, I think when you're starting to understand and support and actually know players and remember them and be out in the backyard and sort of commentating yourselves as them. So Brownie was up there, obviously a great sort of classy goal kicker. And you're right, enigmatics is good. And him and Richo sort of formed this, almost, whether it's Batman and Robin, but this sort of duo together. Oh no.
Don't say that. Let him say that sort of stupid shit.
Okay. Well, that was how it's sort of my memories of it. That Richo was the big dog, and then Nathan Brown was sort of just, hanging around.
Okay, well, it's taken quite a bit of negotiation. Nathan doesn't do anything for free. No, that's not true. He's here out of the goodness of his heart. We'll take a short break, and then when we come back, we'll have the boy from Bendigo with the gorgeous left foot right after the break. Welcome back to episode 8 of the Western Bulldogs podcast, Barclay Street. And look, it took a lot of jockeying, it took a lot of negotiation, a lot of management. There was talk of a fee involved at some point, but eventually Nathan Brown looked deep into his soul, deep into that sort of black space under his rib cage, and he found the goodness in there to come on here free of charge. I just want to make that point clear to Bulldogs fans. Nathan was not paid for this interview. Brownie, welcome to Barclay Street, man. How you doing?
Yeah, good, Rob. Thanks very much for having me. Long-time fan of the show. I just can't wait to get into it. To talk to the Bont as well. This is like Bulldogs royalty here.
I was just about to say, Bont grew up a Tiger supporter, so he's got sort of fond memories of you running around in the number 7 for the Tigers. But have you guys spent much time together? Have you met each other?
Met each other a couple of times, not an extended period. I remember interviewing Bont down at the pub in Williamstown after you won the grand final, so on the Sunday morning. So that was an amazing day for you guys and a good day for us on the Sunday Footy Show. But I haven't spent an enormous amount of time with the Bont, but I have read some of his articles about how he was a Tiger supporter and how much he loved Richo. And Richo was his hero, and why not? He was the best player I played with, even better than you, Murph. So it was good to read those stories.
I must have been in some sort of nick, I could imagine. I don't know how good the quality of the interview was, mate. But I've come on, I reckon, to the Sunday Footy Show once or twice as well, and always enjoyed mixing it up with you. And particularly, like I'll mention, and you mentioned yourself, I was a big Richmond fan growing up. So was it around 2004 that you moved across to the Tigs? Is that right?
Yes, yeah, end of 2003 season. So 2004 was the first.
Yeah, and I was about 9 at that stage. So I was mentioned before to Bob, but that was probably the time where I started, you start to remember plays and sort of reenact them out in the backyard. Yeah, I would have been 9. I was born in 95. Yeah, I was still pretty young. Yep. So I did. It was, yourself and Richo, the modern day probably Tigs that I really love, sort of imitating a bit. So you always kicked the bag, which was nice as well, mate. So I loved goal kickers, and you were pretty handy at that.
Hey, Bont, I want to ask you a question, and I know it's not my podcast to ask the questions, but I'll fire one out. How did it feel being a Richmond supporter? Obviously, you played in the premiership yourself, but then to see Richmond win the premiership a couple of years later, the next year after so long, did you feel anything as a former supporter?
Yeah, I guess I was happy for the team in a sense, and it was interesting because my dad was a big sort of Richmond supporter, and as many people do, they follow sort of who their families barrack. And I sort of asked him the same question. I was like, oh, well, how did you feel after barracking for Richmond for so long, and then seeing them win? He sort of said he was happy. He still barracked well and truly for the Bulldogs. I'm spewing that we weren't there, but he was happy for the supporters and the people who'd done the same thing. They'd been through, not seeing one for a little while, and was really happy for all the people. So I probably felt a bit the same. And it's always great to see, periods of absence get broken. And I certainly appreciated that for all the people. How about you?
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was the year before, obviously, the Bulldogs won it. To be honest, they were both very similar feelings for me. I probably knew more players at the Bulldogs who I had connections with for a long time, but both were pretty special. Probably disappointing that I didn't get to play in either of them, but to see your two clubs play in grand finals and win premierships, you do get a bit envious. And obviously, we play this game to win premierships, and it didn't happen. But to see those players so happy about it was great.
Yep, absolutely.
So, Nath, you played 219 games. We all know that should have been, a lot more, cut down with that cruel injury. 82 with the Tigers, which leaves a few more for the Dogs. Do you feel like you're more of a Bulldog or a Tiger?
Good question you ask, because back before the 2016 grand final, I did a function for, I think it was 3AW back then, and I was sitting on the table. Richo was on my left and Juddy was across the other side of the table. I didn't really know Juddy then, hadn't been a Triple M with him, and he asked the question to me. He goes, so how do you feel about tomorrow? Are you more of a Doggies person or more of a Tigers person? And I didn't know Richo was listening over to the left of me. And I said, I think because I spent longer at the Dogs and I enjoyed my footy there more, I think I'm probably more of a dog. And Richo just sat there and listened and didn't say anything. And then we were out in the drink one night having a few beers, and he'd obviously harboured that towards me, and he brought it up. And you know how Richo can get really serious, Murph, at times. It was a real serious chat. He goes, geez, I was disappointed that you said you're a dog.
We want to do a little bit of a trip down memory lane with you today, but what are your sort of memories of like the real early years? So you're a prodigious talent from Bendigo. You had the silver chair, long hair, pick number 10 for the Dogs, and came to the Bulldogs at a really weird time, end of 96, where the club almost folded, and then 97 was this kind of spectacular season that ends in heartbreak. What are your kind of memories of those, that first year?
Well, like everybody, their first few years, I think the memories are a bit of a blur. I was 18 years of age, and at the time, the Bulldogs were all full of men. I mean, there wasn't any young players. I was the only one who got drafted that played that year. And I think for the next 4 years, I was the only draftee that played. But because we had so many, guys who were around that 23, 24, 25 years of age, and it was a hard environment. It was a team of men with Libba, Paul DiMartina, Jose Ramiro, Scott West, and it was almost kill or be killed back then, because the club was on its knees. They'd finished second last, and Fitzroy went out of the competition and finished last. And that pre-season, I thought there was a couple of times I went back to Bendigo thinking this might be all a bit too much for me. It was nasty pre-season. Like, there was so many punch-ons. I remember Tyson Lane and Scotty West punched on. Libba and Jose were punching the bejesus out of everybody else. And Libba was sort of on the outskirts, maybe not getting a game. And it just created this atmosphere where nobody wanted to give up anything. And they built that really hard-nosed, Scragger-type atmosphere in 97 and almost got us to a grand final. But back in those days when I was an 18-year-old, it was pretty confronting, sort of the stuff that went on that pre-season.
You always, right through your whole career, you always played, with flair and confidence. Was all of that, like, was that real self-belief within, or was there part of it that was a bit of a front?
I think it was more self-belief, Robert. As you said, that I reckon when you come through the under-18s and you understand, I guess, your abilities, and then once you do start playing AFL, you have some self-doubt. And it wasn't until, I think, in my third year where I kicked 7 goals in round 2 against the Cats, and I held the ball above my head, which got the ire of the Geelong fans, and certainly got the ire of Plough and David Smorgan at the time. But I felt that was the first time I really felt that I belonged at AFL level. So I was probably a bit over 2 years in, and from that game, I reckon I got more and more self-belief and started doing a few more and more silly things. But it certainly gave you the confidence to really attack the footy a lot more as well.
How did that game play out? Because Bob mentioned maybe there was a similar incident maybe earlier, and that was going to be part of our group hug section. But you went on to win the game after that, because that's that's a pretty nice little shove it to the Geelong fans.
Yeah, we ended up losing that game, Bont. I'd kicked 7 10 minutes into the third quarter, and I thought we were home, showed the ball above my head, and the Cats just kept coming back. But the problem was I'd done a double-page spread. So I'd had an okay game in round one against, I think it was Adelaide, and then a double-page spread of me and Tony Liberatore Senior, because he took me under his wing. I probably wasn't the hardest trainer in my first couple of years. So then he was making me get up at 6 o'clock on a Monday, a Wednesday and a Friday. And we're going for these runs in the back blocks of Aberfeldy. So the Herald Sun got wind of that and realised that Liver had been a big part of me developing as a footballer. And so we did this double-page spread. And back then I was still a little bit naive about what you can and can't say. And the photo of me on a skateboard and Libra in a suit probably didn't do me any favours. But the comment that they asked me what my ideal night out was, and my response was drinking VB cans until 5 a.m. And so that was the big headline the next day. And so Smallgo and Plough hadn't said anything to me pre-game. The only thing Plough said, he goes, when you have a double-page spread, you got to play well. So I was pretty happy that I kicked 7, but they tear strips off me after the game.
I love how that's sort of like, that's a rule. Like, like one of football's 10 commandments. Like, you get a double-page spread, you have to play well.
Yes.
Talk, walk the walk. Yep.
Well, I mean, there's so many moments we could revisit with you, Nath. We've only got, we don't have infinite amounts of time. But there is one that we would like to show. We like to do this on this podcast where we, especially in these times where there's not much footy around. In fact, there's zero footy around. We've been sort of revisiting a bit of footage or a piece of play, and so step into our footy time machine. We'd like to go back to round 5, 2008. So you've already disowned the Dogs. You've taken the money. You went money on me, mates. You went the money to the Tigers, but you're well entrenched at Tigerland by this stage, and this game was a classic, really. Just I had a quick look at the stats today. It's round 5, 2008, Dogs and the Tigers, and it goes right down to the wire. The game ends up being a draw, and the scores are 130 each. Now I don't know if that's some kind of a record, but that seems to me
that would have to be.
It's a shootout.
That's pretty a pretty high scoring encounter.
Did you blokes defend back then? Was there any element of defence in your game plans, or was it just who can score the most?
Some of us did, Bont. Some of
Zero.
us did.
Are you saying you?
So there was quite, as you can imagine, it ends up being a draw in front of a big crowd, both sides. I'm not sure how the Tigers were going that year, but the Dogs were flying. Quite a dramatic finish to that game. You had a pretty good day, Nate. You kicked 3, and I think at least some of those might have been on the great Dale Morris. But we'll play the footage.
The glove.
Yeah, and we'll just play the footage, and you'll get a bit of a sense for it. Maybe it'll bring up some memories, and then we'll have a bit of a chat about it.
Good man to have it too. Cooney loads up to full forward. The Flyers like from the clouds. He's got to look up quickly. He's got to play in the square.
What a mark.
It's a huge mark.
Oh,
come on, mate.
What's happening? What's happening?
Look at Mitch Morton.
Take him off the ground.
He's got
It's
the
like
boot
Mitch
holster
Wallace.
set.
That was Mitch Wallace.
Apparently the closest. So he's kicked 2 today. Looking okay. Looking
A good kick.
very good.
Well, yeah.
And he scored away the side. Will
The
win
scores
this
are
now.
tied.
Patterson, beaten by Patterson. Foley kept it in front, fell to ground. Going again. Patterson threw his body in, and he's going to get a free kick. Patterson wants to go. Clock is down at 2 seconds. We've got a draw.
Schultze on the wing. Oh.
That's interesting.
That's a double fister up in the air too, isn't it?
Oh.
There's no hiding there.
You fully dared the fangs. So let's just backtrack a little bit. There's quite a bit to digest in there. Firstly, how good a mark is that by Lakey? He's about 4 deep. They've swung him forward from fullback. An extraordinary mark. The mark is overshadowed though by Brian quick thinking really to immediately go for a cramp and release. Quite extraordinary.
Oh, dear.
What do you remember about that moment?
He did it well. And the thing I do remember, like people saying, nah, Brian's got to take the kick. Brian was actually not a bad kick himself from a distance. But from being obviously at the Bulldogs previously, I knew that Will Minson was a very good set shot kick. Not so much around the ground, but when it came to the mechanics of it, and I thought as soon as Will got it, we were in trouble. But I still remember him being on the ground, and I still can't remember why I thought there was a draw at the end, but certainly a good kick by Big Wilbur.
So it's almost like a little game of the game of poker plays out. So Brian marks it, clearly doesn't want to take the kick. So then smart Lindsay Gilby, who was our best kick, he rushes in, and the umpires are like, and the Tigers are like, hang on, this is like set play sort of stuff. And so almost like they negotiate and say, Minson. No, Will's miles away.
He had to run from the goal square.
Dennis community's like, where did Minnow come from? So, and I suppose unbeknownst to everyone on the Tigers, except probably you, we knew that Will was a good kick and he nailed it home.
Did you see from the vision though? Will had to run from the goal square. He had to run like 25 metres to get it.
Yeah, Lindsay had the fresh boot polish dye in the hair too. Lindsay, he wanted
a piece because he kicked a couple. I think when I saw the stats too, he kicked a couple of goals, but so did Will by the looks of it. He kicked 2 already, so they'll both, they'll both have the hot hand a little bit. But you're right, Willie's a good set shot at goal, and especially from that was about 40, 45 out. He's done really well there.
Hey Nate, what was it like playing against your old team? I mean, by this stage you've done it quite a few times, but was it a strange experience?
Well, not a strange. I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I didn't enjoy playing against any other club as much as I enjoyed playing against the Bulldogs because you'd spent so long there, and you're playing against your mates. Obviously, being yourself and very close to Gia and Smithy and Westy and even Darcy, who didn't speak to me for 2 years after I left the footy club. Now we're good mates again now, but and Duke, he can hold a grudge, the big fella, but just. There's still the in-jokes you can have, like when you were playing on me that day and you had those massive big socks and they looked like leg warmers on. They were massive for your legs, like they were brand new pack. And I looked down and I said to you, what are those socks? And just stuff like that you can enjoy out there because obviously footy, it's a hard game and it's hard to play and there's a lot of kicks in the guts along the way, but there's certainly some times where you really enjoy it. And playing against your mates, as much as I probably should have still been playing with you, I did enjoy playing against you.
Well, Bont, it's that time where we do the group hug. So in these times of isolation, which sound like they're starting to be eased a little bit, so we will be able to wrap our arms around you at some stage, Nate. Whether you want that or not, I'm not sure. But we do a little segment here called group hug, where Bont will ask you a question, I'll ask you one, and it's a virtual arms around you, mate. So nothing to be too scared of. I wouldn't have thought. But Bont, do you want to open the batting with our esteemed guest?
I do. I just wanted to follow on from that point about playing against the Dogs at different times. I'm curious to know who of your teammates had the most to say when you played against them. Now, I bet Murph had a fair bit to say. Was he the most vocal, or was there someone else who stood out that was always angling to get you?
Murph did have a fair bit to say. Probably not the most, though. Brian Lake was one of the biggest talkers out there. Lindsay Gilby used to come out with a few. Matty Boyd was good, but I still reckon the best when I played against the Bulldogs was Paddy Bowden. He had an awful amount to say, Pat the Bowd, but the only thing Bowd forgot to do when he did play against us was get a kick.
That's a nice clip. I like that.
clearly, your strong connections you made at the Tigers and finished your career there and played some great footy. But do you think you should have stayed in terms of just the pure football stuff? Do you think you should have stayed at the Bulldogs?
Well, a year into the Tigers, when we'd won a wooden spoon, I was sitting there thinking this was a pretty bad move. And to be honest, if I had my time over again, I would probably choose differently, Murph. And I don't think I've said that. I don't think I've said that publicly, but I had a great time at the Tigers. Enjoyed the footy there. It was a massive club, and for a little bit of time there, we were playing some great footy. But I probably do regret leaving the Dogs and the circumstances that it was, and who knows what might have been if I had stayed. But I guess you make your decisions. But yeah, there is a little bit of regret there.
We played in 3 prelims. We could have been triple premiership players, but anyway, that's okay. Bont, what's your
I like to ask our guests, particularly with regard to the game and when they played, particularly when they're younger. Who was the first player you sort of, not to maybe to give you a bath, but sort of the welcome to the league game where you were sort of like, shit, this is football. You said when you joined the club, it was full of sort of grown men. You were pretty young. Was there a player that you played against that sort of, went, oh God, I'm in the league now. Like, this is a step above.
Yeah, a couple of times Simon Goodwin played half back for Adelaide early on in his career, and I was playing half forward, and he was just so strong and was just pushing me off the ball so easy and gave me an absolute bath. And back then you got dragged for like, a quarter or a quarter and a half. You didn't go back on, and then you got on the phone and player would go, make sure you do something because you've done nothing all day. But certainly the first couple of times Simon Goodwin played on me, he gave me a good bath.
Yeah, he was a good player. He used to love playing the Bulldogs, Simon Goodwin too. Nath, in 2005, when you were at the Tigers, the first 10 rounds of that year, probably maybe the peak of your form. And I know you don't mind talking about it, but for that 10 weeks, were you the best player in the history of the AFL/VFL?
See, this comment's got out of hand. All I said was I was one of the most influential players in that period. I must admit it was one of the most enjoyable periods I had. As a player, when you get out there and some days you just feel heavy, you got heavy legs and you go, gee, it's going to be a hard day today, and you got to really work through it. But every one of those 10 games when I went out, I felt like I was so light on my legs. You felt so much energy, and everything came easy that year. And then after that, the old heavy legs came back the next couple of years. But it was just one of those moments where you feel really good as a footballer.
Can I just on the back of that, because clearly then the horrific broken leg, and part of the story is in all the work you did and you came back, but you're never quite the same player. But I kind of want to ask you, like, are you filled with does it give you a lot of pride, the fact you were just able to get back? I think people kind of just underestimate how serious that broken leg was sometimes, and the fact that, I think a lot of mere mortals probably wouldn't have even got back out on the park.
I still remember one of the first things the surgeon said to me. He goes, look, I'm not going to say you won't play again, but there's a small chance that you won't play. There was broken in 9 spots. Eventually, it took me probably about a year and a half to get it right. And then I remember leading into the 2000 pre-season, I felt like I was running on top of the ground again, felt like I was as fit as I was in 2005, and played the last practice match against Collingwood up in Mildura. And we're going through a drought back then, and I started to feel a bit of pain around where I broke my leg, and I got another stress fracture just above the break, and I missed the first 11 games of 2007. So that sort of slowed me down. But you're right, I was never the same player. I think it affected, I was big on lateral movement if I was either playing in the middle or in the half forward line or out of full forward, and I felt like I lost my lateral movement, and I felt like I was one of those players that was on tram lines or train tracks for a couple of years there, and the lateral movement went, and I was probably never the same.
You got any more for him, Bont?
Well, my last one really to more to just understand what your sort of favourite football memory is out of your career.
Favourite football memory? I reckon the goal that Chris Grant kicked against the Bombers in 2000, the Bombers had won 20 straight, and the build-up we had for that week was extraordinary. So when he kicked that left foot snap from the boundary, I had no doubt he was going to kick it, but the feeling around the ground and the feeling after the game, we knew we weren't going to win the premiership that year, but to beat the Bombers that night, outside of playing finals early in my career, I felt that was probably like encapsulated in one moment, an amazing feeling.
Yep. Could be one for us to unpack and have a look at, I reckon, in another episode.
That would be a good one. Yeah, that would be good. Big one for future. Hey, Brownie, mate, thanks so much for coming on the Western Bulldogs podcast, Barclay Street. We really appreciate it. You took it all in good fun. A spectacular career. You gave the Tigers, great service and loyal service. But for Bulldogs fans, one of the fan favourites, and I love playing with you. Probably the most skillful player I ever played with, and you were a very calm, guiding influence on me when I first started, and I know that's the same for Gia and a couple of other blokes. So, mate, thanks for coming down memory lane with us. Don't be a stranger, and look forward to catching up when this isolation's all over.
Appreciate that, Murph. Very nice words. Appreciate it. And Bont, I just want to ask you one more question. Murph used to rotate 2 T-shirts in his collection. There was one called Music for the Masses, and there was also another one called Rado Mechanical. We put it in better. Does he still wear them around the footy club these days?
I got a feeling he does. Do you still wear them, Bob?
Well, no, I don't. But the Rado Mechanicals, we put it in better. That was it's the greatest T-shirt that ever was, and I brought it up with Justine one night, and she said, "Yeah, I threw that out." And I looked at her, and her face sort of dropped, and she's still kind of, "No, I was just only joking." But I'm pretty sure my darling wife threw out my favourite T-shirt and the greatest T-shirt that ever was. But we'll have to Brownie, thanks
for having
so much,
us, boys.
Good on you, man.
No worries, mate. Thank you.
No worries.
Take
Cheers.
care, mate.